different things. Like we spoke about yesterday, we got into askara. We mentioned askara is a certain sickness of the throat. Rashi says it starts in the intestines and goes up to spreads to the throat, a complete finishes at the throat. It's a deadly sickness, and I think that is the sickness that the students of Rabbi Akiva, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, and they died with askara, with the throat. So our Gemara said that askara, if a person has that ailment, it's a sign of lashon hara. It's a sign of negative talk about a fellow Jews. And also the Gemara says that similar gas ruach, a sign of arrogance, is aniyut, is poverty, which we said yesterday that as a result of a person who is arrogant, so Hashem wants to bring him down from his high horses, and the punishment for that might be poverty, and therefore, as a poor person who's poor, a lot of times is humble and no more arrogant. That is or it's to show the person you shouldn't be so arrogant. Look at your situation. But I saw Rashi here, interestingly says that the Gemara in Kedushin says that what poverty are we referring to? We're referring to poverty of Torah. That if someone who is poor in Torah, it's a sign of arrogance, which means because if a person is arrogant, he's full of themselves. That also comes with overly confident type of person feels they don't need to go ahead and review the material, the Torah study so much. They don't, if they're arrogant, they don't want to spend enough time studying under other people. And when you don't study under other people, you don't study under the people, the greats, and you don't have that experience and you don't review, that makes a person poor in Torah. So a person who is poor in Torah and Yud, there's two types of poverty. There's poverty, but it's interesting that the Gemara refers to poverty, that same word that refers to poverty financially is the same word that's referred to poverty spiritually in his Torah studies. That's how Rashi learns, but I think they quote the Maharal, so that one of the Mefarshim says it doesn't mean it's exclusive. It means only, the Gemara only means that poverty in Torah is a sign of arrogance. It means what I said as well yesterday, that also poverty financially is also a sign of arrogance as well. But it seems that the main translation or the main poverty that the Gemara is referring to is poverty of Torah, which is a sign of arrogance. Tana Rabbanan. So the rabbis taught. Good morning, Jaime.
Good morning.
Good morning. Tana Rabbanan. We're on the page bottom of 33a on the bottom. Askara Bola Olam. We said this type of sickness of askara, which starts, Rashi says, in the intestine, that goes to the throat. It comes to the world al hamaseh. Now on 33b, 1. Hamaseh, people not taking off, eating their fruits in the land of Israel when it's in the state of tevel, before the types are removed. You can't eat the fruits until the person tithes the fruits. The person goes ahead and he eats the fruit without tithing it, that is subject to such a punishment. And it's mida keneged mida, Rashi says, because the food comes in through the throat and enters the intestines and enters the stomach, and this person gets punished with a punishment that goes from the stomach through the throat. Rabbi Yossi says al lashon hara, that askara comes which it ends at the throat, the sickness, so too the speech, negative speech about fellow Jews is done through the throat, so that brings such a punishment. And I said yesterday, I think, I don't believe it means a one-time negative speech. Usually it means a person who speaks negative about fellow Jews on a regular basis. Usually that's called, the Chafetz Chaim refers to that as a Baal Lashon Hara. He owns, someone who owns a house is called the Baal HaBayit. He owns it. And someone who owns that negative speech, that's the type of person I would say that could be subject to this problem. Amar Rava Vitim Rav Shuma Levi. Rava, and some say Rav Shuma Levi, he said, Mikra, what is the pasuk for such a thing? Where do we see that Askara, this sickness of the throat, comes from Lashon Hara, negative talk about fellow Jews? Amar Rava Vitema Rav Shuma Levi, Mikra, HaMelech Yismach Malakim. King David HaMelech, will rejoice. Will rejoice when Hashem saves him from the people that are out to get him, and when his salvation, with David being saved, will be publicized. Yitalel kol hanishbabo. Anybody who stuck close to Hashem, anyone who swore by Hashem, connected to Hashem, stayed to Hashem, and they also supported David, they will be praising, they'll be praising themselves for staying strong, and they'll be praising Hashem. Ki yisacher pi dovrei shaker. When the mouths of the people speak bad about King David HaMelech, because there were people that were slandering David HaMelech, when saying that he was out to get Shaul, out to get King Shaul HaMelech. When those people will be, when their mouths will be closed, I mean, when the salvation will come, then there'll be a lot of happiness and praise. So when the pasuk says ki yisacher pi dovrei shaker, it uses the word closing, but the word closing here, there's other words to refer to closing. Use the word of askara, the word yisacher, which same letters of askara, which indicates that yisacher, that askara comes for dovrei shaker, talking false about fellow Jews. But even though Lashon Hara is not only false, Lashon Hara, negative, talking about fellow Jews, even when it's true, you're just talking negative about a fellow Jew. But it's also, it indicates the lies, the slander. So that's where the askara comes from. So the Gemara says, in the yeshiva, they wanted to understand, we have these two opinions of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi. Why does this askara come? And Rabbi Yossi, the first opinion says because of Maaser. And the second opinion says because Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi is because of Lashon Hara. Does he mean Lashon Hara only, exclusively? That's where it comes from, only for Lashon Hara. And he's arguing on the first opinion, who states that it comes for Tevel, not separating the types. Or does he mean to add to this first opinion? Not only does Askara come for not separating the food, not separating the types, but Askara also come for Lashon Hara. That is the Gemara's question in the yeshiva, is they wanted to understand what exactly, good morning Asaf, good morning Nathan, in person, and what exactly is the argument of these two rabbis. So the Gemara says Alashara Kama, is it only a full lashon negative speech? Does the asker come for according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi? Or Duma Af Alashon Hara Nami Kama, or even for lashon hara, in addition to not taking off the ties. Tashma. So the Gemara says, "K'shenichnasu Rabbeinu the Keren B'Yavne." When our ancestors entered the vineyard of Yavne. What's the vineyard of Yavne? Very good. So close to the destruction of the second temple, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the leading rabbi, he took the Sanhedrin, the biggest court of the Jewish community, and he brought it to the city of Yavne, and he reestablished the Sanhedrin over there. They're called Kerem B'Yavne because the way the rabbis sat, they sat rows and rows, like the ways of rows of vines in a vineyard. And it's interesting that one of the commentators bring down that it's possible that they sat that way, even though that wasn't the usual way that the Sanhedrin would generally sit. They usually would sit in a semicircle where everybody would be able to see each other. But perhaps they were very concerned about the Roman authorities, that if the Romans would come in and see that they have the Sanhedrin going, they would be, who knows what they would do. So if the rabbis are just sitting, if it's just a yeshiva, if it's a study hall, the Romans wouldn't be as, they wouldn't be as vicious. So therefore, some suggest that maybe that's why they sat in this fashion. So it became known as Keren B'Yavne. When they entered Yavne, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, we are on 33b1 in the bottom paragraph, 33b1, first column. That's all right. Tashma. There was these three great rabbis that were there regarding this following discussion, and they have this question: why is this problem, this sickness of askara, why does it begin in the stomach and end at the mouth? Nene Rabbi Yehuda Brabalai. So the first person who responded to this question, with three rabbis sitting in on the discussion, or at least three rabbis that are going to be discussing the issue, and Rabbi Yehuda Brabalai responds, he was Rosh Hamedabrim B'chol Mokom. He was always the first to speak. We're going to see in the Gemara that why he became the first to speak in every assembly of people where there's to speak. He was the first to speak. Now, in general, the one who got the honor to speak first, usually in a yeshiva, let's say, and you have a yeshiva and a learning, when there's a discussion in the academy of the yeshiva, the first person that would speak would be the biggest rabbi. He would be whether he was the oldest or not the oldest, he would be the first to speak because it's a head of the opposite, correct. But when it's if it would be that type of occasion, the big rabbi would speak. But if it would be a assembly, not an assembly of learning, let's say a communal assembly of some sort, then you would honor the elder statesman, the oldest person, to go ahead and be the one who would speak first.
They say Allah. Because if they will fix that, and they will set the halakha, so nobody can playing with a not playing, right? Judging a person's life. You have to speak last.
Right, but over here it's not a judgment of life. So there they can honor the Talmud Chacham, which is really there's a mitzvah to honor the Torah scholar. The bigger the Torah scholar, just like really if there's no Kohen in the shul, right? Who should get the first aliyah? They should honor the Talmud Chacham. If you have multiple people to give aliyah to, and you want to give aliyah to all of them. What I'm saying? You want to give the rabbi first, because he's technically, that's the honor. So they say over here that if it was like festive occasions, when it wasn't a Torah, it wasn't a gathering of Torah per se, it was just, a wedding, a brit, whatever like that, they will honor the elder statesman to speak first. But at other times, they say that, usually the big Torah scholar, that's how they would honor. Morning, Ronnie. But over here, that changed. There was a decree, we're going to see by the Roman authorities, that this rabbi, not necessarily he was the greatest of the rabbis, he was a great rabbi, but not necessarily he was not, even if he's not the greatest of the rabbis, not the eldest of the rabbis, he's the one who the Roman authorities say he's the one who always needs to speak. He gets the honor to speak first. Now, Nana Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi. 1 second. So that was the question. So Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi, Shorosh Madam B'chol Makom. We're now on 33b. Morning, Morris. We're on 33b1 on the right column. He responded and he said like this. The kidneys of a person is the place in the body. Kidneys are known to give advice. Your heart understands. Your heart pictures and formalizes the thoughts, the words, in order to say it. How you're going to say it in your mouth. So first comes the advice comes from the kidneys. Then it moves to the heart. The heart is the second stage. Second step is the heart, where it goes ahead and it formulates what you want to say, what the thoughts were, and then the lashon, the tongue, starts cuts the words, so to speak. But in order to go ahead, cuts the letters, but you need the mouth to actually, the last step is the mouth that actually verbalizes those letters that you're cutting with your tongue. And the mouth finishes it off. And Askara, Yehuda Rabbi Eloi says that this problem of Askara comes as a result of negative talk, of lashon hara, and therefore since it comes from negative talk on fellow Jews, like we said on a regular basis type of thing. So therefore, the punishment comes also in a similar fashion, because the same way a person speaks, the negative talk starts in the kidneys, where it's advising him to say these type of words, and then eventually it moves up to his mouth. So too, this ailment of askara begins like in his stomach and his intestines and his inside, and goes up, just like the way he reaches the level of speech. I mean, Rashi says the mouth completes the negative talk, and he says, therefore, it begins in the stomach and concludes. Therefore, the ailment of askara begins in the stomach, concludes in the mouth, because the heart is the one that understands to talk the negative talk. It makes it this. You could have someone advises you about the kidneys, but then you actually take the advice and bring it to the next level. Okay, now, however, what different Rabbi Yossi says, the reason why askara comes is because because the people eat. So at the first glance, the Gemara is going to question this, but it sounds like they eat things that are tameh, not kosher, right? The Torah refers to not kosher. V'vdalta be'ma behema hatmeya, to the behema tahora, to the animal that's clean and unclean. You have to kosher and not kosher. But the Gemara says punishment askara is actually a punishment of death. Like we said, good morning, Randy, that we said that the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died from askara. So it's a punishment of death, but not eating kosher is not the punishment. Is not death. The Torah says it's a lo saseh that carries malkut. Good morning, Boker Tov. Not eating kosher is lashes, right? If a person intentionally and is warned not to eat not kosher food, it's lashes. It's not death. So how could he say, just to bring you up to date, the Gemara is discussing a ailment, a sickness called askara. It's a type of sickness that starts in the stomach and ends in the mouth. It's like a person who can't breathe at the end, and as a result of that, and therefore they pass away. The Gemara wants to know why is that coming? Why is Hashem doing that? What is it? What is the reason for that type of ailment? So the Gemara says, one rabbi says, because you ate with the mouth and the stomach were involved in eating not kosher food. So therefore, the mouth and the stomach are going to be, this ailment will affect the mouth and will be connected with the mouth and the stomach. So the Gemara says, but do you really think just because eating not kosher food, there should be such a punishment? That the punishment doesn't fit the crime, because the crime of eating not kosher does not come with it the death penalty. So the Gemara says, rather, eating foods that were not fixed. What does mean eating foods that were not fixed? Tevel. Very good, Avram. But tevel, eating, if a person has food that grows in the land of Israel, and if you don't take off the maaser, the tithes, if you eat it without taking off the tithes and giving to the Levi and giving to the, taking whatever needs to be Yerushalayim, giving somebody else, giving to the poor, that carries with it, death from heaven. Again, only intentionally. Not that a person doesn't know. There's no death penalty for someone who does a sin unintentionally. There's no such death penalty. A person doesn't know that God doesn't give that punishment. But obviously we're talking about someone who intentionally knows that he has to take off the tithes and he does not want to take off the tithes. So that's what the Gemara says. However, Nena Rabbi Shimon v'omer, Rabbi Shimon responds, and he says, "Ba'avon bittul Torah." A person, Torah is life, and as a result of not learning Torah, which we saw beforehand in the Gemara, there's an opinion that when it says "V'limadatam otam et b'neichem l'davar bam," we said in the Shema, teach your children to talk Torah. Then we say, and we say, after we say the midst of learning Torah, teaching Torah, write it on your doorpost, mezuzah, write these words of Hayim Shema in the doorpost, and then it says, you will live long as a result of that. So we saw in the Gemara that when it said you will live long, so we said as a result of having a mezuzah, that will help you live long. And also say, not only going back on the mitzvah mezuzah, by the fact that you learn Torah. It's going back both on the previous mitzvah of writing mezuzah, and also you'll live long as a result of what? Learning Torah. But then there's the inference. The person will live long for doing those mitzvot. But if a person doesn't do those mitzvot, then they will lose. So therefore, that's why there's an opinion that says that there will be a loss of life for not doing the mitzvah mezuzah intentionally, not fulfilling the mitzvah mezuzah. And there'll be a loss of life if a person intentionally violates, doesn't learn the Torah. That's what this opinion is saying. Therefore, we spoke about the idea of mezuzah, how serious mezuzah is. because mezuzah could add to a person's life, to his children's life, or chas v'shalom, the opposite, and also the learning of Torah. And perhaps Torah is done through through your mouth is one of the things that you articulate your words of Torah. So maybe that's why the askara, this punishment, ends up within the mouth, in the throat, because this person was not using his throat for the purpose that he was given to use it. One of the things was to go ahead and to study Torah. So that is what the Gemara says. We have three opinions here. Now, Omrulo. So the rabbis said to him, you said that the punishment of askara comes as a result of intentionally not learning Torah when you're capable of just not learning. So he says, what do you mean, Nashim Yochichu? Women do not have the mitzvah of studying Torah that men have and women have is two different mitzvahs. Men have a mitzvah to study Torah for the sake of studying Torah. Even things that are not relevant to me, let's say I'm not a Kohen, I will never be able to go ahead and give the blessing to the Jewish community up there on the platform with my hands raised. I can never do that. I'm not allowed to do that. That's specifically for the Kohanim. But yet I have a responsibility to learn about it. I'm not a Kohen Gadol. I will never go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. I will never go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur to bring the Ketoret, to bring the incense, and the other things that the Kohen Gadol has to do. But I need to learn about it, even though it's not my mitzvah that I'm performing. But I have the mitzvah called Talmud Torah, study of Torah, to know everything of Torah. Women do not have that type of mitzvah. They don't have to learn. They're not obligated to learn about how the Kohen does his work in the Beit HaMikdash. However, they have to learn all the laws pertaining to any mitzvah. Morning, Steve. Any mitzvah that pertains to the women, they have to learn. They have to learn how to perform that mitzvah. But it's not learning for the sake of learning itself. It's the learning in order to be able to perform. That is the responsibility of the women. So the Gemara says, but since they don't have that mitzvah itself of the study of Torah for itself, so therefore, why should they pass away with this askara? You're telling me askara comes for wasting time from the mitzvah of learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah, and the women don't have that level of mitzvah of learning Torah for the sake of itself, of just the mitzvah of learning Torah for itself. Their learning of Torah is a prep for the mitzvot. Our learning Torah is a mitzvah in itself, is a responsibility in itself. Is it clear, Ezra? So therefore, but we see the women also pass away from this askara, from this sickness of the throat. So what? But why? But according to you, you said it's because of bittul Torah, wasting time with Torah. Why should it happen to them? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon responds.
They go to work, they kind of have to learn literally almost everything one learns in the hot wise, because they also know how to not steal at work or what to because they do everything that a man does.
Right.
But the rabbi is saying for the bitul Torah of the learning itself, but for
Right.
the sake of it.
Right. It's not
applying to
so you want
that part of the hadut.
I mean, you're saying maybe because they're not learning what they need to learn in order to perform their mitzvot, but that's not. But that's a separate concept.
The thing is that if a person takes time to learn,
Right.
first of all, he has to learn the mitzvot, start to understand how important it is to learn Torah, and then he has to focus on learning halachot because he has to know the way of life. And then if he has time, learn Gemara. The Gemara you cannot literally get what you need to do today. So you have to know. So if we apply it to women, nowadays the women are so equally to men because they also go to work, they also take care of the kid, not take care of whatever. They do everything, and the men also cook at the home. They do everything. Both of them do everything.
Right. But again, at the end of the day, is even the law doesn't change. Even whatever society, whatever women are doing today, women are in the workforce or all that stuff, but the law doesn't change. There's a great letter to Moshe Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein, they want to know what's Moshe Feinstein's opinion on the women's liberation movement, right? The women's rights and all that. And this letter was I think the late 1970s. Rabbi Kelman was the rabbi in Boston who asked the question. He went on to build the community of West. What's it called? West in Long Island. Not forgot what the name of the community is. But he went on to build that community. And Moshe Feinstein says like this: if the women, why did the women want to? If the Jewish women want to do certain mitzvot, right? And what's the drive why they want to do these mitzvot? If they're doing it because they want to, because they know they're exempt from the mitzvah, and I want to do the mitzvah anyways, because I know that I'm not obligated. But I, as a woman, I want to do those mitzvot that I'm not obligated in. That's great. You want to go, women are not obligated to sit in a sukkah. You want to sit in a sukkah? Beautiful. Women are not obligated to take a lulav and etrog. You want to take a lulav and etrog? Beautiful. But he says the problem with this movement is that the women are saying that they're equally obligated like the men. And that's a distortion of the truth. If you're saying you want to do the mitzvah because you're equal in law, that's not true. You women are not obligated in all the mitzvot that men are obligated in. So that's what people have to be. West Hempstead, New Hampstead, whatever, one of these places. I mean, Kellerman built the community there. So I think it's West Hempstead, Long Island. So the Gemara says, what is the reason for? So why should the women who don't have that mitzvah per se of learning Torah for itself, why is it that they die as a result of this? Why do they die for the sickness of askara, which throat sickness, which you told me is coming as a result of wasting time from learning? But this, okay. So let's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, "Shemevatlot es balehen." If the women, when the men have the ability to learn, and the women just wasting the time of the husband. Of course, a wife needs attention, needs time from her husband. Well, let's say there's a time that she could figure it out, that he could be learning, and she could have her time, not coming at the expense of him not learning. But instead, she intentionally goes ahead and wastes his time from the learning. As a result of that, so that also, that's called, she's causing this, wasting time from learning. So the same way, if the husband, if he intentionally doesn't learn, he could get this punishment could happen. So too, the wife who creates this negation or cessation is another word of learning, she also could be punished. So the Gemara says, but what about Nachrim? Nachrim Yochichu. What about the Gentiles? We find that the non-Jewish community, they're not obligated. They don't have a mitzvah to learn Torah. The Torah was given to the Jewish community. Maybe they have responsibility to know what they're seven mitzvot, but they don't have a mitzvah of Talmud Torah, of studying Torah. So how is it that the non-Jewish people, if you're telling me it's coming as a result of not learning, so why are they dying from the sickness of askara when they don't have a mitzvah to learn Torah, the non-Jewish people? So Gemara says the same idea that we said by the women. Shemevatlin et Yisrael. They prevent the Jewish people. The non-Jewish community, sometimes they make decrees against the Jewish people that they can't learn Torah, like by Hanukkah. Hanukkah's coming up, they don't let us learn Torah, or they just prevent us, whatever the situation is. they'll put certain responsibility. They'll say that instead of us spending time learning Torah, we got to do other things in our schools. They might tell us, they might obligate us, they might create certain laws that we have to spend time doing certain things, studying certain subjects, which might not be necessary for our, not necessary for our growth as people, but they just want to go ahead and put their curriculum, their ideas, their culture on us, and therefore they are taking us our time away from studying Torah, cutting the hours of the study of Torah. So because of that, they get that punishment. So then the Gemara says, Tinokot yochicho. We find there's even children. Morning. We find there's even children that could pass away from this type of sickness, that can't, breathing of the throat that starts in the stomach. They're children. So what, they don't have a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Parents have a mitzvah to train their children, to teach the children, right? Child begins to speak, the parents have a responsibility to teach them the Shema Yisrael, Paratziva Lona Moshe, right, Morris? You have the mitzvah to teach. These are the words that are supposed to be coming out of the child's mouth. And then you're supposed to teach them Psukim, Torah, Chumash, right? Eventually more Torah. Then obviously you send them to yeshiva. By sending him to yeshiva, that will help in his growth. But the children, they themselves they don't have responsibility on their own. They're too young. They're not bar mitzvah. And yet we find that they also pass away from the sickness. So the Gemara says something very hard to understand, and I'll just share my insight on it. Because if they take their fathers away from learning, but the obvious question is, but their children, they're not responsible. So I wanted to say the following. I wanted to say we found something, a very serious thing, that there's a concept of a child over bar mitzvah will not be punished for the sins of their parents. A child who's an adult or a girl, right? Let's repeat the sins of the parents. If the child is 13 or the girl is 12, they're an adult, and they will not be punished for the sins of their parents. But if a child is a minor, under bar mitzvah, they could chas v'shalom be punished for the sins of their parents. And that's why it's very scary. Parents have to be on top of their game always, but they could be responsible for the punishment of their kids. Morning, Sally. So therefore, perhaps the Gemara means if the parents did certain sins, the father did certain sins, that he's deserved, that he's going to be chas v'shalom punished, that his child will be taken away. So then maybe Hashem will give the child that punishment of askara if the child was that was a kid that took his father away from learning. But the child will not be obligated death for stopping the father from learning by himself, because he's not responsible. He's a kid. But perhaps if the child is going to pass away because of his father's sins, then perhaps that Hashem will give the askara by the throat if the child did this. Wasted his father's time from learning, but we'll see more. There's more discussion on that subject. Want to wish everybody should live long. Everyone should do the right things. Thank you all for joining. Have a great day, everybody. It's a very interesting Gemara, right? Thank you so much for coming. You too. Aris, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're right.